or whenever it is. The older I get, the longer I get here. Hate to get here. Anyway, I'd like to make a few comments about where this conference has been, where it's going, and where it is today. As this is our 20th installment, and looking at some of you, you've been here all 20 years. You used to be a little darker haired. Some of you even used to have hair. I've decided that Scott Lee will be the last one of us to go completely gray because he's blonde, unless it just leaves, which, but that's the only reason I don't go bald is because I want to flaunt it to all my contemporaries. This conference really was birthed out of a national conference that met initially in Memphis, Tennessee, and then moved to Birmingham, Alabama for many years. And I became involved in it because Dr. Terry Crisip put a lock on my arm and made me come. You know how physical he can be. And in those conferences, I every year walked away feeling like I was one of the theologically challenged. I went to a Baptist seminary and felt like I was also quite spiritually challenged and enjoyed the process of those things that moved me Christianly and helped me get past the academics of Christianity to the practice of it biblically. I shared that conviction with many others, not verbally. We just were all going to the same place. And one year, about 3 or 4 of us met up in Hannibal and began to pray. Now, Lord, we have friends that would love this kind of thing, but they're never going to go to Birmingham, Alabama. They don't either have the money or the resources or the time or whatever. And what can we do? What will you do, Lord, to provide for these, our friends? And the very next year at the conference, somebody said, everybody who wants to start, thought about having a Midwest version of this, everybody meet at lunch. And so this is where I got tactical. I'm such a tactical person anyway. I thought to myself, what's the best way to stay out of leadership on this? Because it's not to ruin it. I said, well, I know. I'll suggest that they start a steering committee. And so, therefore, since I suggested it, they won't put me on it. That didn't work. Pat Stewart, I'll get him someday. I thought, well, okay, if I'm on the committee, when the committee meets, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. And Pat Stewart says, well, you ought to be the director of it because we're Midwest, and St. Louis is right in the middle of it. And I'm like, oh, great. I have to tell you, though, that year in and year out, this is the most important thing the Lord allows me to do. Not that I'm not doing other things that are important, but from my limited vision, see this as the most significant thing I get to be involved in and have enjoyed every bit of it. I can also say that every year at the end of the conference, I am stunned at how much better the conference was than it was conceived to be. And this tells me that the Lord blesses our ignorance and cares for us and is good to us. And so all praises are to Him for the blessings we receive. Now in your packet you have a little booklet, and it says 20th anniversary. It won't have any information on this conference, mostly because we haven't taped it yet, because it hadn't happened. By the time this conference is over, we'll have had 160 sessions over 20 years, 57 different presenters. 33 of them have only presented at one conference, and 15 have presented at only 2. No one has been at more than and presented at more than 5 conferences. And of the above 2, there's only like 9 people. So the Lord has blessed us with a widespread of participation and blessing and encouragement. And every year there's new faces, old faces, and renewed faces. So we can honestly say God's been good to us. What this booklet does for you, though, it does give you each of the previous years, each of the 19, and in every layout it'll tell you the topic, the year, and it'll give you the 8 sessions, and it will give you the topic of the session and who presented. If you take the little number there underneath the presenter and you add it to the URL down at the bottom on the right-hand side, if you take all of that URL plus that number and hit enter, you will go to a YouTube place for that sermon. So you can view that sermon. I've used these in my classes for years. And they're not all of the best quality. If you see a sermon that you really like and you like to say, I'd like to see that in good quality, the young man back there that's our videographer will sell you a very cheap, it's not a cheap reproduction, but it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. Just your firstborn and a decision to be named later. But Jeremy's been so good to do all this and bear the burden of the activity and the cost. And I know he provides these for people at a very modest price. And so, but we wanted you to have access to them, and then maybe by that way you might say, okay, well, the only reason I'm pushing Jeremy is because I know he does this for free, and I'd like to see him get something out of it, because he's worthy of his hire. And he volunteered all this. So anyway, so this is what this is for. You can get all the conference. There's about 8 or 9 that don't have video because of the miracles of modern corruption of data, or we just didn't have video that year, and they just have like a little logo, and you can still hear the sermon on YouTube. And you're also welcome to share that. I don't have them quite in public domain because you never know what somebody's going to do, but I do want you to be free to see them, and I make them available to all the adjuncts that teach for me at Missouri Baptist, and I use them in classes. Okay, so that's kind of where we've been. You may have noticed that over 20 years, I've gotten a little older. I now have children and grandchildren. And so part of the planning process for the next 5 years is to get some of the younger guys involved in leadership and hopefully send them off into taking over things. And that's a good thing because we need a little bit more life in our step. We've got some good guys out there. The Lord has blessed us with some fine men and on very many levels. And so if this is of the Lord, then we want it to continue of the Lord. And if it's not, we don't. That's the way it is. Now, about today's to make, and I want us to hear, is that in the process of all these doctrines that we talk about, that the Lord has some emotional vestige. You know, many times your children and your grandchildren teach you, or at least illustrate truths that you've learned over time, and bring it more personal. The last time my daughter was at our house with her children, the last night, little Gracie, who is my mother reincarnated, with all the spunk thereof, taps on my shoulder at about 4 a.m. And I roll over. I'm getting used to being awakened in the middle of the night. And I say, Gracie, what's up? Well, Faith has all the brown cover. Oh. Well, is there any other cover you can get? No. Well, would you like to crawl in bed with Poppy? Yeah. So she crawls in bed and she lays her head on my shoulder and she wiggles around and flips over and all this other stuff. And she says, Poppy, you know how downstairs we can watch Paw Patrol on the television? I said, yeah, but it's a little early in the morning to do that. We don't wake everybody. Well, you know, Poppy, we can see it on the television in Mommy's room too. Yeah, I knew that. We also watch it in the living room. Yeah. Poppy, you have a television in your room too. can we see Paw Patrol on your television? Because I love Paw Patrol. I said, Gracie, would you like me to turn Paw Patrol on? Yeah. And so we laid there and watched an hour of Paw Patrol from 4 to 5 in the morning. And you know what? My daughter and my wife both think she manipulated me. You think I had no idea where that was headed? I was eager to lay there and watch Paw Patrol with her for an hour. I loved every minute of it. And the Lord just kind of flicked my ear. You think maybe I feel the same way when you come and talk to me about some simple little silly thing that you know is silly and you're just too self-sufficient to talk to me about? I think sometimes we forget that the Lord loves his people. He loves his people talking to him and coming to him. He has an emotional vestige in his own saving purposes. John Piper reminds us that when we see those things that please the Father, and we learn to be pleased by the same thing, we become more pleasing to the Father. We should learn to enjoy the things the Lord enjoys. And then we should proclaim it. Yesterday I asked my Greek class, if you had a congregation and you could divide them into these people will never believe and these people will become believers eventually, which one of them do you owe to proclaim the good tidings of the gospel? They weren't sure how to answer. Well, the answer is you owe it to all of them. If you have someone sitting in front of you and you know for a fact, if God told you this person will never come to me in saving faith, you still owe it to him to proclaim the gospel. Sometimes I think we've become almost highly selective instead of broadcasting. And I think it may be because of our affections. So that's kind of what this all started as. We'll see what the Lord does with it afterwards. Now, I was told to turn you loose. I do that with no fear or trepidation. I have many stories I could tell about this man that are true because I were there. I won't. What I will tell you is, he has continually blessed me and encouraged me in every phase of my ministry. And I hold him in such high regard that when I'm around him, I stutter a lot and I use the wrong words and I stammer. It's not nervous because I am afraid of his high intellect, which would be true by itself. It is that I have such high regard for him because of how the Lord has used him for me, that I could never ever say it quite right, and it makes me nervous. Luckily, I haven't turned it into a joke, but it is true, sir. Are we singing one more song first, or are we going right after it? We're going right after it, so Dr. Nettles, it is all yours. It's your turn. Your turn loose. You know when you can stop? When you're done. Right. But don't.